Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. Oh, what time of the week is it? Well, it is time for the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. And for those of you who don't know, this is a weekly program where we dig underneath the headlines. We interview local and national activists. We talk about what's going on politically at the national, international level, and in our own backyard. And of course, we call out the establishment on its BS. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. So, got a lot of stuff to cover on the show today, as we typically do. Fun thing to mention. We're going to be having a guest later on in the program around 6:30. Talk about the Poor People's Campaign. Talk about that a little bit. And there are, of course, many things going on at the national level that we definitely need to talk about, including how the primaries panned out. There's some wins, there was some losses. There's one win in particular that I really wanted to dive into, but there's a couple of really pressing local issues that I wanted to kind of discuss first. And one of them, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about something going on here at the extremely local level with the county commission race. So, this article came to my attention recently. And this is on the MLive/Gazette. But this is about a particular candidate, Shakita Lewis. She's running for the County Board of Commissioners, I believe to unseat Michael Seals. And I'll just read from it a little bit. The headline is, Kalamazoo candidate says she fed kids instead of paying court fees. Now, there's some very important context to all of this that I'll dig into a little bit, but I wanted to touch on this first. So, let me go ahead and just read from the article. This is by Malachi Barrett. It was posted yesterday around 10:40 a.m. So, it says a candidate for the Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners said voters shouldn't be concerned with a past felony conviction and overdue court fees. A month after filing to run for office, Democrat Shakita Lewis owes $2,500 in court fines for 12 civil infractions and misdemeanors. 2 bench warrants were issued on January 19th after Lewis failed to appear for a show cause hearing scheduled the day before, according to Kalamazoo County 8th District court records. Most are related to driving with a suspended license. Well, $198 is from a 2014 third-degree retail fraud conviction. Lewis was convicted of a felony in 2009 after she pleaded guilty to forging records, but doesn't owe fees for that offense. I was in a vulnerable position, and I was younger and a lot more immature, Lewis said of her convictions. I made some mistakes, and I paid my debt to society. I moved forward, doing my best to make better decisions in life. The 32-year-old single mother said she is obligated to feed her 5 children before paying the court fees, which added up to a point she couldn't do both. Lewis said she's in the process of paying off the fees, but isn't sure if it will be accomplished by the primary. Lewis said the debt shouldn't affect her ability to govern. I am fully capable of managing my finances, she said. I have to take care of priorities first and make sure everything else comes later. Lewis is on the August 7th primary ballot, challenging Democratic incumbent Michael Seals to represent District 4 on the county board. And it's also got an endorsement from Stephanie Moore, the District 1 rep. For those of you who don't know, District 1, it covers most of the north side down onto kind of the southern end of the Vine neighborhood. And I'm pulling up now, make sure I want to make sure I'm given the right map here for District 4. So, District 4, that's more towards the northwest side of town. So that's the area of like Mazel Avenue going towards Gull Road and the neighborhoods in there. It ends at G Avenue. And goes basically as far south as it looks like Stadium here. And this one, District 4, it's a very snake-like district. It cuts across pretty much the whole city. And even has like a little bit of an outcropping past Drake Road toward West Michigan Avenue. By the way, if you want to actually look up the district maps, just go to the calcounty.com website, go to district maps, and it'll show you right there who basically where your district is and who runs it and all that good stuff. So, first of all, you know, it's interesting that this is coming up. For those of you who don't follow local politics quite to the extent that, say, your local affiliates or local compadres here at the radio program do, this actually reminds me a lot of something that came up with a city commission candidate in the last election. Somebody basically dug up a record of unpaid parking fees that she either had not paid or were still on her record. And this seems very similar in nature. Not only that both of the candidates that I'm speaking of, both of them were also African American women, and both of them are suddenly having a lot of these past civil infractions boiling up to the surface. Now, I would say some of the stuff on here is a bit more serious than just parking tickets. The issue with the third-degree retail fraud, that's something that I would personally like to dig a little bit more into and find out more about. As we have the local candidates come on the show later in the year, probably sometime in the fall, maybe that is a pointed question that can be asked. Particularly, it seems rather recent. 2014, that's just about like 4 years ago. The rest of the stuff, though, what's interesting to me is these relatively minor infractions get kind of brought up to light, or dug up, as you would, by certain people in the city who maybe like think themselves as like investigative reporters or some sort of thing. And let me tell you, like, the difference between digging up something with some real substance and digging up something that is basically just kind of dug up in a way to make a candidate look bad. And, you know, what would I be concerned more about is if, let's say this candidate had some investments in some corporations around here that I knew had done harmful things in the community, or if some of her criminal record had more to do with either embezzlement or corruption charges. That said, it doesn't, and as a matter of fact, her reasoning for not paying these fines is something that you would hear from most people. Most working class people would have an excuse like that, and it's good to see that there are actually some working class people running for positions like this in this round of elections. But yeah, that is a very sensible explanation, and I think that, Malachi does a good job in this article being very neutral and unbiased, but I think the people who kind of dug this up initially, they wanted to kind of throw a shadow of criminality or irresponsibility onto this candidate. So not necessarily saying like, oh, this candidate is somebody who is going to, this somehow reflects on their character in a way that means they're going to be a bad city commissioner. But it almost in a dog whistle fashion, saying, look at this person, they committed these crimes and they didn't take accountability, or they didn't, pay for them. At least like that would be kind of the overall sense you're supposed to get from, I suppose you're supposed to get from this particular string of non-payments, when in fact the most of these things that are on her record do not reflect on what she actually wants to do as a county commissioner. Now, I'd actually be really interested in knowing that. As somebody who's gone to a lot of the county commission meetings, I've met Michael Seals more than once, and I'd say there's probably some county commissioners higher on my priority list as far as who should be primaried. Sorry. In fact, I think Mr. Seals, he's done a lot of pretty good work for the community in his role as commissioner. But yeah, again, I'd like to see what she actually wants to bring to the table. I don't want to hear about a bunch of minor violations, most of the average working class, working poor public in Kalamazoo would be likewise guilty of if they were in the same situation. So I'd like to follow up on this topic very soon, but just if this is something that any of y'all have heard about, I wanted to give a little bit of context to it and maybe explain a little bit of my point of view of its relevance and maybe like some of the reasoning behind this information being disseminated. So I will be right back. I'm actually going to go let my co-host in. Give me just a sec. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So we just Nora, I guess you said you were listening outside, but we were going over a local story about some stuff that was said about a local city commission or county commission candidate. Sorry. And we'll be delving into another really important local issue. I believe we're going to be joined by our friend Ed at some point to talk a little bit about what is going on about a young student here in the Kalamazoo public school system named Isaiah. Some disproportionate jurisprudence, as it were. But we also have a plethora of national topics to really dive into and sink our teeth into. But
if I may, I actually do have another pretty related local story.
Oh, please.
I haven't really been following up most of the other county commission stuff closely, but I did recently meet up with Paul Haig. He was one of the people to get arrested protesting for DACA.
That's right.
And he is now running for the commission seat that Wolderman has stepped down for. his district actually includes a lot of the east side and most of the Vine neighborhood, actually. I'm pretty sure that's like where you meet Stephanie's is like, kind of like a little bit into downtown, actually. Like Stephanie's got she's got like all north side and most of downtown.
I misquoted that earlier because part of the Vine neighborhood is Stephanie's district, but you're right. There is a good chunk of it that's Wordleman's.
Yes. Something interesting about 4, by the way, all of it's just outside the Kalamazoo city limits. Like, it's still in the county, of course, but none of it's in the city. And you can tell it's on purpose. If you look at a map of the city limits, it's it's gerrymandered in such a way. But Paul Haig's running for Wilderman's commission seat. He doesn't have like a platform just yet, but like he's being very intentional about going to people where they are and listening to what concerns they have in the community and talking to them about possible solutions, which I think is a very good strategy. It's great to meet people where they are. I know his campaign manager personally, actually, who's somebody I went to K with, and he seems to be doing a great job. I'm really proud of him there. So do keep up with Paul Haig. He's someone to follow, and once he gets his platform solidified, I think he'd be great to have on the show.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm thinking, probably as we get close to the fall, keep in mind, just so you get it out there, start thinking about this. There are a lot of local elections coming up in November. That's not to say there's like some big ones like governor, attorney general. You're going to be voting for your congressperson in the next round, which is, I guess, that's another story we're going to talk about. Will be one of 4 people at this point. Paul Clements and Eponine have by the Michigan Board of Signature Counters. No, there's
signature counters.
There's an actual It's they both of them fell just short of the 1,000 signatures required. Paul's at like 991. I think Eponine was at about 974, and Paul Clements is currently challenging that. I have a statement from him buried somewhere in my saved posts, but the gist of it was his reasoning for challenging the election board was that even though legally speaking, it sounds like they were legitimately struck from the signature. Either like a wrong address was put in, or they wrote in a different county. Paul's explanation was, well, is that another? He basically painted it as a form of like geographic disenfranchisement. Eponine is not challenging her petitions. I think there were just a few on there that just didn't sync up. But as far
I think one person put their birthday instead of the date that they signed the petition.
And like that's just kind of bad luck of the draw. Full disclosure, I worked a lot on Eponine's campaign. I know there are a lot of people working really hard to get that last round of signatures. I guess I would give advice to anybody else who has to like get a wide net of signatures when you're in a campaign. Do it verbosely and do it early, because those deadlines will sneak up on you, and you never really can plan ahead for unforeseen events. There were some things that happened with the campaign. I know Eponine was sick for a bit. And a lot of her volunteers are also busy activist type folks. So just if you're out there thinking about running for office, plan ahead for those eventualities, because they could eventually happen.
Being intentional about getting those signatures quick is something that's also you're really going to want to work on if it's an overcrowded race such as this one. Eponine was my first choice too, and I'm rather disappointed to see her go, but I think one thing that's kind of silver lining on both Eponine and Paul being left out, which first of all is pretty ironic, because the only real poll that we've seen from this race is that Eponine and Paul were significantly ahead of everyone else, despite being just cutting it short of getting onto the primary ballot. But now that there's this race isn't as much of a clown car as it was previously, we have two progressive candidates and two like more, centrist corporate candidates. So this will mean much less likely of splitting the vote between one way or the other. So it still looks like it's anyone's game right now, but like clearly George Franklin's the guy with the money, and it seems that Benak has a lot of the support of the new guard, so to speak. But at Long John I really like, but I kind of want to look a little bit more into him. And Rich he's rich. He's better than most centrists.
Matt has been he's been raising a lot of money. And, it's always kind of a knee-jerk thing with progressives, like, where's that money coming from, And I think that's something that legit needs to be looked into. Policy-wise, though, I mean, the Price is Right. And I remember when we had him on our show, he actually had a very good answer when it came to Medicare for All. He critiqued Medicare for All almost like from the left. He's saying, well, actually, I think it should do more. He's talking particularly about reproductive and preventative health. And if you don't know, Matt's campaign is largely centered around the fact that he's been working in the medical industry for a good chunk of his life. He set up a lot of nonprofit infrastructure with getting care to low income, high need areas. And but you're right. That it leaves the race with kind of two people ostensibly on the left and two who are more or less in the middle. Honestly, I'd say that leaves. No, we have two progressives, one centrist, and then one Republican.
Yes.
Man. I guess I'm shooting myself in the foot. If Franklin becomes a candidate, he'll probably never come on our show again. But, I'm sorry. The guy, actually, we'll do a more thorough breakdown of some of the candidates, but, even if he hadn't donated huge amounts to Fred Upton or spent his career being a corporate lobbyist, he also has no real, all of the other candidates, even Rich, he's not as bold and of a reformist as I tend to vote for, but he at least that's he understands what the progressives want, and he understands how those work, mechanically. George, he doesn't have any reform platform, so he doesn't know about that. We had to explain we had to explain certain voting reforms to George while he was on the phone or on the show.
May as well have been on the phone.
Yeah. It's just he doesn't really have any bold policy ideas other than we need somebody who's not a Republican sitting in that seat. And frankly, you're not enough of a not Republican for me. I'm sorry. I just don't see a huge enough difference between George Franklin and Fred Upton. I'm sure George would be somewhat less destructive to the environment and a few other things, but it's a very similar corporate agenda from where I can see, and he has talked very much about reforming the system and fixing it from the inside, but I'm sorry, trusting a corporate lobbyist to reform Washington is like asking a fox to go redesign the hen house. I mean, he knows how the hen house works, though. All right. So, actually, let's. It's about 5:28 right now, so maybe it'd be a good time to go to a break. We can take a breath and figure out what we want to talk about next on the program. You are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local business's name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widerfm.org.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we've got a couple of stories here that really intersect in a couple of fairly unique ways, and so we were talking a lot last week about kind of the implications and the history of immigration here in the United States. A lot of people have really been woken up to some of the horrors of ICE and immigrant detention through this story that's bubbled up to the surface of mainstream media about children being separated from their mothers. But it, of course, goes a lot deeper than that. And of course, if you think this is somewhat how new under Donald Trump, well, you know, we've got some bad medicine for you. They've been abusing immigrants for a long time, and up until Trump got in office, Obama was the worst. So, with that being said, we also had a Supreme Court decision over the last week, which has to do with how bigots sell their cakes. But no, there's broader implications than that, but we also wanted to break it down, because there is a little bit of good news, bad news with the SCOTUS decision, and chiefly among them, it is not a decision that sets a broad precedent. It basically deals with a specific case. So, hey, all you homophobes out there, no, this doesn't give you carte blanche to stop selling your wares to people just because of who they like to love. So, why don't we dive first into this story about Roxana Hernandez, and I'll let you lead off with it, Nora, but this is, again, another very unfortunate story about basically how our Border Patrol is treating migrants, and particularly Roxana in particular, who is a transgender person. And, I forgot to say at the top of the hour, Happy Pride Month, everyone.
Happy Pride Month. ICE just legally tortured a trans woman to death in their facility, and the Supreme Court made it a little bit easier.
Actually, I should say Angry Pride Month. Have an Angry Pride Month.
Very Angry Pride Month to all of you.
Get righteously indignant. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so y'all might have heard about this so-called caravan of migrants coming through Central America to, the U.S. that, President Trump has angrily tweeted about a number of times because, who else is his favorite scapegoat but immigrants? And we talk about like, immigrant rights and trans rights in the show, but not a lot about how those issues particularly intersect. And I think the case of Roxana Hernandez is very revealing about what goes on there. So let's do it like a little bit of backstory first. So she was fleeing from Honduras, which is known for like having like especially egregiously dangerous for LGBT people. And where's the? Let me get the specific quote.
Oh yeah, and while you're looking that up, I want to mention, that is a huge intersectional issue. There have been a lot of migrants coming up to escape their home countries because there are a lot of countries in South America that have particularly draconian either laws regarding homosexuality and transsexuality, or just social norms regarding them that can often lead to assault and death far more openly than it happens in the United States. There's a lot of homophobia and transphobia here, but there are in a lot of South American countries it's a lot more out in the open. You can literally get beaten to death in broad daylight.
Oh yeah, that's what'll happen in Honduras and like some places in Brazil and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So She came up here. She's trying to find out, like, a safer life, maybe that she'll able to access this sort of transition-related healthcare that she wouldn't be able to get otherwise. But when she was picked up by ICE, they put her in a private prison detention center. It was, I think, the transgender unit of the Cabola County Correctional Center in New Mexico, and was hospitalized the next day for dehydration, pneumonia, and other HIV-related complications, and died 8 days later. Essentially, what they did is they kept her like in isolation in what's often like referred to as like an ice box, like this super cold, like freaking detaining room that they just kept her in while she's dehydrated, she's getting pneumonia, and having HIV doesn't make that a lot easier. And their negligence killed her. Like, it's literally tortured her to death, and it's literally chilling to think about, no pun intended. And it's just awful. And you hear what she's running from. It's not good either. ICE. According to ICE, she was the 6th immigrant to die in their custody since October of last year. It's a quote, The Guardian, Hernandez and the other women in the caravan were fleeing countries where it's often dangerous and even deadly to be trans. Yet despite coming to the U.S. in search of safety, trans women in ICE detention can face similar risks to those they face at home. They are targeted and harassed by police or held in detention where they experience violence, discrimination, and are unable to not access medical care, all of which may lead to dire consequences. Concerns about the protections of LGBT. These individuals, particularly transgender women, are extremely vulnerable to abuse, including sexual assault while in custody. In an interview with BuzzFeed News before she left Mexico, Hernandez said that she contracted HIV after being gang raped while walking home in her neighborhood. Trans people in my neighborhood are killed and chopped up into pieces, then dumped inside potato bags, she told the news organization. Yeah. The situation has only worsened as transgender women have become more visible, and the LGBT community in Mexico have won some battles, like the right to gay marriage in 2010. She's previously come to the United States on 3 separate occasions, according to ICE, and was eventually deported each time. This time, she was part of the caravan, and which contained an estimated 23 trans people total. It's uncertain what happened to them, and it's kind of interesting how, like, whose stories are told and whose aren't, But I'm glad we're able to hear this because it's very revealing as to, what's going on and just how negligent, our Gestapo unit that we call ICE just, operates.
Oh, it's just a brazen, not to sound like a broken record, but I mean, I guess the listeners, they hear us say a lot of these things a lot, but the callousness and brutality of it, we have And please keep in mind, this isn't just like, there's a few bad apples in ICE who don't care about migrants or trans people. No, this is institutionalized in a very overt way. I was actually listening to Democracy Now! The other day, and they were talking about this a little bit more in depth. They were actually interviewing the journalist who wrote that article about basically immigration courts on the border. And I don't know if you read that one. They got the picture of they basically have these giant group trials where they try all these migrants at once for trying to get past the border. And something that really stuck with me is the reporter was talking about like listening to this podcast that people who are part of ICE actually do. And it was a lot of like this woe is me, we're getting like beaten up and teased and told we're this or we're that. And ostensibly what it was is like they were asking why, if we're getting assaulted, why can't we be more brutal? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Their whole line of thinking is around why do we have to be so nice? So from there, yeah, if you have some genuine like kind of meat-headed ICE officer, and this isn't even somebody who like just goes out of their way to hate gay people, but they are literally trained and kind of reinforced through their institutional culture to not be sympathetic to migrants or their medical needs, especially people with that extra layer of marginalization, like this trans woman who, she had HIV, she was trans, she had these extra medical needs that were necessary for her survival, and they were woefully neglectful, and that is why this woman died. It wasn't some freak accident. It wasn't even just because the Trump administration is so mean. He may have given them a little bit more incentive and carte blanche to not really care as much about how nice they presented themselves, but this has been their institutional culture for some time now.
Yeah, that's another article mentions that the ICE officials yelled at her because she was sick, and another trans migrant was anonymously quoted that she didn't get medical care until she was transferred to the private detention center in Kibola. She had to go through a couple. She was picked up for I think the reason was on top of entering the country illegally, like stuff like prostitution and petty theft, like stuff that's either small potatoes or shouldn't really be illegal. And what else? Of course, if the ICE agents are going to be trained to act and think this way, they're going to yell at her and they're going to not, do the things that are necessary for her health. And yet the ICE agency still lies about, providing comprehensive medical care for these people that are held in these awful detention centers, that you're going to have to get some really nice medicine if you're going to have people put up with that. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that for now. It's just generally a really depressing story, and the whole SCOTUS ruling is kind of a slap in the face on top of it. We are kind of lucky that it did apply more specifically to the specific case with the cake and what have you. But what does this mean for Michigan? What does this mean for people in the Kalamazoo County and in our own backyard? Well, Michigan does not have LGBT-related protections as part of our Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, so it could make it at least a little bit easier for people to discriminate against people like us. However, the ruling does not overturn any statewide or local ordinances that would protect us in terms of employment, housing, or public accommodations. So within the Kalamazoo County area, things are mostly fine, but in most of the geographic area of Michigan, your chances are you aren't going to live somewhere that has those kind of protections for people. Keep in mind, this is also when half the population of the country lives in somewhere that does not have protections for LGBT people in employment, housing, or public accommodations. So this could lead to some lower court battles that could quickly make things better or worse. But those are really what we're going to want to keep an eye on as this unfolds.
Well, I really want to thank you, Nora, for kind of zooming down and localizing that for us so eloquently. And, I kind of want to bounce off that for just a second. I think one, it reminds me a lot of we were talking about a story on the program a few weeks ago with what they were doing with what several Republican legislators were doing in the Michigan House it was the Michigan Senate regarding welfare benefits and how they're trying to basically make this two-tiered system where, you wouldn't have these extra stipulations from the federal government if you lived in a rural area, but if you lived in an urban area where basically the overall income level of your area is offset by all the richer outlying suburbs, then you wouldn't be able to opt out of these federal restrictions. And that was aimed specifically, I think, at mostly black urban working poor areas, black and brown urban working poor areas like Detroit and Flint. And that it reminds me of this particular instance because what you essentially have when there's no kind of statewide standard for this is you can be in Kalamazoo, you can be in Ann Arbor, you can be in Detroit, you can be in Lansing, Traverse, any university town in Michigan, and at least legally speaking, you are probably going to have some layer of protection, but any points in between, just legally speaking, you could be denied service because of your sexuality, and there wouldn't really be a legal recourse to do it because that has not been updated and enshrined in our books, since the gay rights movements and Stonewall and all that really started gaining steam in LGBT rights movement. I'm sorry. Which again goes back to not to make this some sort of plug, but we do have somebody running for Attorney General who one of the primary platform planks is to defend LGBT rights. So,
Yes. One thing that is also this court case and these issues tie into, there is, in fact, this is also a correction from some earlier points I brought up on the show, that there's a ruling in the federal district court that contains Michigan that basically says that you cannot fire someone for their gender identity, even on religious grounds. But keep in mind, this is a lower court, obviously, to the Supreme Court, and I don't know if it applies to anything outside of employment and gender identity specifically, but it could still this still could be flimsy, as most of our rights are in this state. And we all know how our Michigan state government in Lansing is just brazenly ignores the state constitution.
Oh yeah.
And how Bill Schuette on a whim just decided that they're not going to enforce LGBT protections anymore. So yeah, great stuff to look forward to. But it's kind of ironic, literally the day after the Supreme Court ruled this, the Supreme Court equivalent of the European Union just ruled that every member state needs to have full respect of same-sex marriage, and that it can allow your partner, if they're outside of the EU or another country, to gain residence inside the EU. So it is I guess adding on to the specific little things that make living in Europe as a working class person easier than in most other places. However, one concern I have with this ruling in Europe is that this could embolden more right-wing populists, they're bringing in immigrants and the gays.
Oh yeah.
Oh, except they just say that in a French accent, and that's probably what it.
No,
be
the gays. Where is Marine Le Pen? Make us France great again. Yeah. That's a whole other subject we could talk about for a while. But yeah, just keep in mind, folks. Trumpism isn't just in America.
No.
It's happening all over the place.
I'll touch very briefly on the fact that in the province of Ontario, which is, our neighbors in Canada, they are pretty close to electing a Trumpist of their own as, their equivalent of governor, except, their governors have way more power than ours do. So if you know people in Toronto, tell them to start getting organized because, at this, there's still about half a month until that election happens, but a lot of the media spins are you have to vote for the centrist party, you can't vote for the NDP, but the NDP is really starting to gain some traction, and it's interesting to see where this goes. I can't speak a lot to it because I don't live in Ontario, but I will be going to Pride in Toronto after that election happens. So that should be very interesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No kidding.
I think it's on the 23rd. Oh, my gosh. This is right in the middle of Toronto Pride Fest. Fingers crossed.
Oh, and I believe, Pride Fest is going on here in Kalamazoo this weekend. Is that correct? Okay, yeah. So, I'm going to GR Pride this year. There's a couple of artists I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Ooh.
But I don't know. Nor have you heard of anything? I know in Grand Rapids they're doing a march in the morning, but have you heard of anything going on in Kalamazoo? It's a little bit more, I don't know, like radical or something that be kind of the more political aspect of the LGBT movement?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, like, if there was some sort of, I guess, demonstration going on in Kalamazoo, there's a very good chance I would have heard about it by now. But one thing I do plan to do this month is every weekend, not including the one that just happened, I plan on going to at least one Pride Fest. I've only ever gone to, the Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids ones. But I'm going to try to make it out to Detroit. Like I said, I'm going to Toronto, and I'll do a post-op on what those were like, what kind of things were being pushed then. For example, both times I went to Grand Rapids Pride, it felt like very, very rainbow capitalist, if you will. Like a lot of businesses like having their booths out, like, oh, we're gay friendly. Look at get our free stickers and from free handbags and buy our products later. But that's kind of the vibe I get from Grand Rapids Pride. Kalamazoo Pride has significantly less of that, but I think part of that is because it's a more it's I guess there's a little stronger local business and local community aspect of Kalamazoo, while Grand Rapids is the second biggest city in the state of Michigan. But I'm interested to see what Detroit and Toronto are like this year. Yeah,
definitely. I know there's been a lot of kind of memes and all that going around. We talk a little bit about, we talked about pointing out how Disney and other corporations, they will try and be like, well, look, we have, what's the
rainbow flags,
mouse ears, and all this. It's like, what about paying your gay workers, a living wage?
About that, actually.
Yeah.
The workers of the Disney World that have striked recently finally won their $15 minimum wage.
Yeah, I did see that.
It's interesting. If you look at the CNN article about it, they say, Disney just decided out of nowhere to give the workers a raise. How about that?
When you wish upon a star. Actually, no. It was
when you wish upon a union.
It was less that and more like A Bug's Life. The ants realized, wait a minute. There's more of us than there are of these dang crickets. We ain't gonna whistle while we work anymore until we get paid more. So we got about 8 minutes till the break. I think maybe a good time to talk about some of the primary results from last night. And I think again it's probably the most disappointing thing was California.
Yes.
Which I think this reveals the difference between liberalism and progressivism in a big way, in that in a lot of these really struggling, like working class purple or like Midwestern blue states, progressivism and just more, left-wing populist politics finds a larger foothold, because I think there's a larger and more coordinated base of struggling working class people who want to really get involved politically, whereas like California is, it really is like, it is the Mount Doom, the headquarters of like kind of the corporate Democrat machinery. That's like that's where they live. That's
they're in New York.
They're and New York, yes, and it is hard for a populist to really gain a lot of traction against, say, a Dianne Feinstein or, a Nancy Pelosi in a state where a lot of people are those kind of wealthier liberals who, maybe they've done pretty well under the Clinton, Bush years, Obama years, etc. A lot of them are a lot of the people who fund those same candidates. That are more centrist and more corporate friendly. That's where they live in California. Let's not forget, George Clooney's infamous $300,000 plate dinners and all that. I think like one of the biggest hits was, there was a big push by the Justice Democrats to, run a viable campaign against Dianne Feinstein. And they did not come even close. Yeah, their candidate didn't even rank in the top 4. I think it hovered somewhere around 2%. Of course, you do have to remember California has completely open primaries that they function a little bit differently than the rest of the country. So it's like open, it's open to both parties and like the top. It's open to all parties. Yeah, it's open to all parties and one primary. Yep, and I think it's like the top 2 or 3 vote getters move on to the general. Is it top 2? Is it? Yeah, it's top 2 that goes on to the general. It's like I think called the jungle primary or something like that. Yeah. So it does actually make things easier for third parties to get on the ballot in a viable way. Yeah. However, the money and name recognition are still king. And because of the way these jungle primaries work, you'll have like 1 million people running under whatever party the district will lean most towards. Usually there's like 20 Democrats to each one of these primaries. Oh, yeah. That it's almost no surprise why candidates like Allison Harston could get buried between anybody else who either has like a great platform and some grassroots or a lot of money or some other appeal. Like, if you look at the list of people who are running in each of these primaries, it's absurd. Like, they have too many. Like, if you thought the 6th district here was bad, like, go to California, see what's going on there. Yeah, it's like their elections have always been kind of a jungle. Like, you remember the year Schwarzenegger ran, he was running against like 20 people or something. It was nuts. So California didn't turn out too well, but there were some pretty good victories, and I wanted to mention one in particular that caught my eye. Over in New Mexico, there's a woman, she's on track. This is in the House of Representatives, but her name is Deb Haaland, and she's a very strong climate change activist. She wants to defund ICE, and I'm going to read just a little bit of this article about her from Common Dreams. This is a quote from the executive director of 350 Action, which is in reference to 350 parts per million, which is how much CO2 we should have without passing. We shouldn't pass 350 parts per million, otherwise we're in territory. I think at last count we were hovering around 400 and rising. And from this, she says, Deb is the type of climate leader we've yet to see on Capitol Hill. She's inspiring people everywhere with her unapologetic progressive platform to stand up for indigenous rights and keep fossil fuels in the ground. We need leadership like Deb's in Congress to move us toward a fossil-free world that works for all of us. She's focused her campaign on progressive causes, including fighting against new fossil fuel infrastructure while expanding the use of renewable energy. And that is really important, by the way. I want y'all to keep in mind the average mainstream Democrat talks in terms of like, slowly getting off of. I mean, what Hillary Clinton's climate, platform from the last election was essentially fracking's okay as long as we slap some solar panels on some stuff.
In case any of you are wondering, that's the equivalent of going on a diet, like eating salad after 5 cakes.
Yes, exactly. And, this isn't just me being like an extremist either. Like, all of like the respectable scientists say, no more fossil fuel infrastructure. If we want to mitigate like the really apocalyptic effects of climate change, we can't have any more fossil fuel infrastructure. The Democrats heard that and it's like, can we build like maybe 1 or 2 less? My scientists, that's not what I said. It also includes she wants to repeal the Republican Party's tax plan, enforce a $15 federal minimum wage, defund immigrations and customs enforcement, which she calls an out-of-control institution that is terrorizing Americans' families, and she is also for Medicare for all.
I think one of the things that really hit me is that if she wins, she'll be like the first Native American woman to get in the Congress.
That's true.
It kind of baffles me, but also doesn't at the same time as to how that hasn't happened already.
Well, yeah, that I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, keep in mind, a lot of, I think there's two aspects to it, even more so than African Americans, natives have really, especially collective native populations, have really been kept down into systemic poverty. And there's also, there's a lot of sentiment in native communities that's like, why would you really want to interact with their system? As it were. I think those two, that might play into a lot of like why we haven't seen, a native person, a native woman that is, get into Congress before. But yeah, it's definitely like long overdue. And what's really great about this to me is it's a safe blue, quote unquote blue district. Really, by winning the primary, she's done most of the work. Unless something really crazy happens between now and the general election, she probably will be the next representative out of that district in New Mexico. So, woo indeed. Yeah.
Honestly, there are so many different states that had primaries yesterday. It's really hard to consolidate all the results. But I did just double check some other important things that happened in California. For example, the top two primary with Nancy Pelosi did end up with, Pelosi, obviously, and the one Republican that ran because there's too many, Democrats that wanted to be the guy, Mm-hmm. And that most of them had really great, progressive platforms. I was almost hope that, she wouldn't make it, but, so that's, rather disappointing. Apparently, they have, a really great, populist left option for lieutenant governor, which is great news. And they have, populist left challenger to Anthony Rendon, mm-hmm. who, if that name's familiar to you at all, which it may or may not be, he was the guy who basically killed the single payer getting passed in California. So everyone in California could have free health care by now, except for that guy, but he might not be around for very much longer.
Yep. All right. I think it's about 6 o'clock. Let's go ahead and go to break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
Is your RSO looking for new ways to get its name out to Western's campus and the greater Kalamazoo community? Why not use the WIDR airwaves? For more information on how we can work together to promote your organization and events, go to widrfm.org and click on the Airtime and Sponsorship page under the Support tab.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Excuse me. So, a couple other things I wanted to talk about on the show. Excuse me. So, we had some good news there with a rather awesome person who will likely just be getting into Congress in the fall. But let's talk a little bit about this other story that I found I wanted to talk about a little bit more in depth. This is actually some good news. This is kind of some good news if you're into that gallows humor. I don't know if it's even really humor, but it's a good riddance to some bad rubbish. This is from USA Today. Ailing billionaire David Koch steps away from a conservative political empire. He is stepping down from a key role in the political and policy empire that made him and his older brother two of the most powerful men in American politics and among the most vilified figures in Democratic circles. Koch, 78, is leaving the board of the Americans for Prosperity Foundation, Koch officials announced Tuesday. He also is retiring from his role at Koch Industries, the Kansas-based conglomerate run by his brother Charles. David Koch served as executive vice president of the company and a member of its board. He was chairman and CEO of one of its subsidiaries, Koch Chemical Technology Group. Koch officials cited health reasons for the departure, but declined to provide details of the nature of his illness. David Koch is a prostate cancer survivor and donated hundreds of millions of dollars to cancer research and medical facilities over the years. Also, should be noted, he's also donated millions of dollars to people who are trying to dismantle subsidized universal health care and provide cancer treatment and access to medical facilities for people all over America. But, you know, if you're rich, that's just fine. And I don't know, I didn't really want to dig too deep into this story other than say, this man has been responsible for untold amounts of human misery. We refer sometimes on the show to the Powell Memo. That was written in the early 1970s by Lewis Powell, who would go on to become a Supreme Court justice. But he basically laid out the blueprint for conservative neoliberal economics. It was the counter-revolution of all counter-revolutions to basically scale back the economic gains made during the New Deal in the 1960s. And the Koch brothers, with their anti-government, anti-tax, anti-regulation, and really I should put all emphasis on regulation agenda, were one of the great students and architects of that memo, and applied it on a political level and scale that is untold and unseen. The waves we've seen in the last few years, during the Obama years, the Tea Party, you can basically point to the Koch brothers as two of the primary architects of that state of affairs. And one of them is getting sick and stepping down. Of course, there will likely be some snake's or dragon's head to boil up and replace it. But one can take at least... What's that?
That'd probably be his younger brother, actually.
Yeah. That's right. But for the time being, is all's well that oligarchs well, and that is that is an oligarch who I am pleased to hear is not very well. Maybe all those spells from all the working class witches finally kicked in. All right, so Well, what should we talk about next, Nora?
Have you read the article that I sent about the Chinese social credit system thing they're doing?
Ooh, I have. I read a really great article about this in Adbusters, but I think it's just fascinating from a sociological point of view. And maybe I can let you jump on it first, but like kind of the Cliff Notes version of it is China is doing this thing right now where basically it turns your day in day out life into this game where the government will give you points for being a quote-unquote good citizen and detract points from you for being a bad one. And this is something that is basically visible to the rest of the community at large as well, which is... I can't remember which dystopian novel I read where they used that system, but it was at least one of them. But, if you want to talk about it a little bit more, Nora, this is a pretty interesting story.
So I think what first comes to people's mind when they think about this, because of the way that China is, as it is now, is a very authoritarian state already, is that this would be used to coerce the population into being endlessly loyal to their government. Unfortunately, that's already the case. They don't really need this in order to do something like that. What it seems to me more like this is be able to coerce more of their interpersonal interactions in order to better suit their interests. They have plenty of ways to subdue the population and just force them to do what they want, even outside of this. But this is just kind of a new way to do things, and it's interesting. It could based on this value system that the government assigns you, they would make you have a longer, wait times for healthcare, for example. You could not show up as much in dating sites. They're talking about different things to what is it? I didn't read I've only read this once. Don't worry. It could also be used to ban certain social gatherings to prevent organizing against the government apparatus. It could blacklist people from certain restaurants. There's a lot of really scary things about this, and it's hard to really say for sure because it's hard to get decent journalism coming in then out of the country.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But from the outside looking in, just keep an eye on this, see what happens. One thing that kind of bothers me is how does this affect, how is this compared to the way we arbitrarily assign value to things in the Western world? We do that based on money and based off social status. This is different than how many friends you might have on Facebook or followers on Twitter. But
I think in America though, that's already kind of used as a de facto social measurement. How many likes can you get? How many followers do you have on Twitter or Facebook? And it's not as direct as the Chinese system, but I mean it's part of the same bloodline at least, because what all it really is it's taking a lot of those realities of kind of how our society has evolved around social media here in the Western world and kind of institutionalizing it, using it for something that can be used directly for the government's benefit in this way to not only surveil social behavior, which the United States government already does, but to modify human behavior and to twist around behavioral outcomes around this system where you can literally have the population kind of control and shame itself based on these social incentives and disincentives.
It's like the panopticon thing that was described by wasn't Freud, Foucault, the other last name with an F, the socio-psychological philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a very good point actually, and just keep in mind and watch out especially with the shady stuff that Facebook's been caught doing. And these other big tech companies, which you talked about before on the show, but the potential's there. It could happen just as easily anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. I think that there was another article up here I wanted to bring some, or at least discuss for a little bit, and wait. Now, we did already talk a little bit about what's going on in the EU. But, right. That's
this
right.
is local.
I forgot. I wanted to mention something about. We're aware of the. I was being shown a clip by one of my roommates, and we talked about this guy before, the Illinois Nazi, who is currently running for Congress and actually won the Republican primary.
It was uncontested.
Uncontested. Well, yeah, he was uncontested. It is in a district where typically Republicans hardly ever win. It's not competitive. But it's still pretty jaw-dropping to see somebody come out who is an out and out Holocaust denier, quoted as saying that, I think when you get down right to it, white people want to live in all white neighborhoods. Ho, 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 ho. Literally, he's a former member and organizer for the Nazi Party here in the United States.
I effing hate Illinois Nazis.
I hate Illinois Nazis. That's right. But this got shared recently, and I thought I'd share it on the show. Sometimes we talk a little bit about history, and I found this very interesting. But this is from Matt Smith, and he describes a historical anecdote from right here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I'll just go on and read it here on the show. In 1962, a woman from Westnedge Hill came to a city commission meeting with a petition in her hand, signed by 100 fellow Westnedge Hill residents. They were petitioning what I can only assume to be the first black family to move into the neighborhood. And why was she petitioning the city council? Because in 1962, she could no longer go to court and enforce the racially restrictive covenant that was most likely on the property. In other words, some do-gooder in the neighborhood probably broke rank and sold to a black family. Miss Lori Van Boven of Fairview Avenue stepped up to the podium and addressed the council. We believe we have a right to a choice of living in an all-white neighborhood if we choose. The minute one colored family moves in, ours is no longer an all-white neighborhood. In order to live in an all-white neighborhood, we're forced to sell our property at a loss and move. As they go on, Mr. Washington, she continued, now speaking to someone who was the first African-American city commissioner in the history of the city. Do you realize the potential social problems that this will create all over the city? Please consider our petition in this light. Arthur Washington, who was the previously mentioned commissioner, after taking a deep breath, replied, as far as social problems, there won't be any unless you make them yourself.
Ooh.
Then Commissioner Paul Schreier came to the white lady's aid with the racist idea that discrimination is actually a white right. Well, hey, there are two sides to every coin. I think your privilege and mine is to sell to whom we choose or to refuse to sell to whom we choose. White supremacy has an amazing ability, with the magic of language, to turn discrimination into a white privilege. Luckily, Commissioner Lee Stryker had Washington's back. I'm rather sorry that this sort of thing happens in Kalamazoo. It's something we expect to read in papers coming from the South. Hashtag Kalamazoo redlining. And that was from 1962. Although, I wanted to point out in the context of, these other stories we've been talking about during the show, this isn't really new, and the ramifications of that live with us to this day. Westnedge Hill neighborhood is about 89 to 88% white, and the neighborhoods that have historically been black or of mixed race, which is the Edison neighborhood and the North Side, have also remained basically around the same levels when it comes to the ethnic population breakdown. The only neighborhood I think that has had kind of substantial flux has been the Vine. And that in itself is more of a product of the Vine kind of transitioning continuously between its working class element and student body that comprises a lot of the neighborhood.
I think I would argue even that like the college areas, like, you know, the college housing areas specifically of like Western and K would have like a certain amount of fluctuation too, considering how different people have applied to both those schools and how they've attempted either like intentionally or unintentionally to diversify their student population. And I think that's like probably another example of how that's happening in Kalamazoo. However, one of the quotes of that article or that post is very telling because she met the racist white lady. She mentions that if like, you know, the black family moves in that neighborhood, it's going to drive down the real estate there. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that actually happens still to this day, which is why part of the reason why that one Dodd-Frank repeal bill that went through made it easier for banks to discriminate against people of color for home loans for a specific reason. So you still have so if you're wondering why segregation is still a thing today, other than like, you know, the redlining that happened around the 20s, this is why we still have black and white neighborhoods.
Yeah, and you know, I think to a large extent that's something that a lot of people just have a hard time really wrapping their head around or understanding. You know, these de jure segregation, and that segregation that isn't legally enforced, is largely a byproduct of these redlining practices that happened in the 60s and the 70s, and they still live with us. And a lot of people don't understand. It's like, well, why can't so-and-so just move to a new neighborhood? Or, well, now it's largely because, you know, housing prices are for a certain middle-class market that creates generational wealth in a way that for a black or brown family living in the Edison, living in the North Side, their house doesn't generate that same kind of wealth. So hold on just a minute, folks. I'm getting a phone call. So let me go ahead and take that. It's from one of our guests. All right. I'm gonna turn up the music real quick. I'm gonna go to a quick break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment, we are going to be joined by my buddy Ed Genesis. We're going to discuss some local BS that's going on with the school to prison pipeline. We have got a dear community member and young student who is getting some unjust justice dealt out to them, and we've got some people here in the community who are organizing people to fight back against that. So we're going to be joined by Ed Genesis in just a minute. Until then, and enjoy the musical break. We will be right back.
Playing games with a long man, high tail
Bees are disappearing, and no one really knows why. Bees help us grow all of our fruits and veggies through pollination. A world without bees could mean a world without apples, oranges, and avocados. No avocados means no guacamole. You can help save the bees by supporting our beekeepers by buying local raw honey, or by reducing the use of pesticides in your home garden. Another great way to help is by planting bee-friendly plants like clover, lavender, and sage. This has been a friendly reminder from Wider to save the bees and be happy.
Be happy.
This is an open slot in the Wider Clock and could be filled with an underwriting announcement for your local Kalamazoo business. For more information, please visit widerfm.org and head to the contact page.
For those interested in
underground hip-hop,
here is a complete disc jockey show with all the modern pace of today's exciting radio.
Listen here on Saturday night from 7 to 10.
You can't go wrong.
There's one important element missing, however. That's you.
Hip-hop epic show. Saturday night. You know what I mean? DJs bring me young, play that real live shit. The hip-hop epic show. I know you're gonna do
Yo, I'm talking about
the hip-hop epic show. The DJ bring me young. Transmitting live Saturday night. W-I-E-R Kalamazoo.
Keep bouncing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we are joined today by our dear friend Ed Genesis. He is a local organizer, and he's actually going to update us on a situation we've had. We actually had our dear friend Alicia on the show a couple weeks ago, talking a little bit about this subject, but there was recent development the other day. Young student named Isaiah, currently in the court system for an infraction at school, and our local court system is going a little bit overboard. But I think I'll hand it to Ed. Ed, could you kind of lay out what is the situation with this student, and tell us a little bit about what happened the other day at the courthouse?
Yeah, how's everybody doing? I'm Ed Genesis, Michigan United, Northside, We Active, and also a fellow with People's Action Mass Liberation. I'm a community leader, and I've been doing a lot of work, and I ran across a guy that I've been knowing. His name is Ernest, and his son Isaiah was pushed by his teacher at Central. He pushed back. The teacher tried to restrain him. Isaiah was able to climb his teacher, choke him, allegedly, what the video shows, but the police report actually shows that the teacher initiated the assault. What's going on now is we went to court yesterday, and he should have been allowed bond, and he was not. Right now, he's just literally serving dead time. He's just sitting. His next court date is August 10th. They wanted to have a competency hearing and evaluation, so they set that up. They had the court psychiatrist do it, but they didn't like the findings, and so they want an independent psychiatrist, and it's going to take till August 10th, so he has to sit for another.
So he's got to sit in juvie all summer. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right, so let's back up just a little bit. Just so people get kind of the full context of this. So, I've been keeping up with what you and Alicia and Shannon, what y'all been sharing about Isaiah, and it sounds too like he's also has like he's not what is it, neurotypical, or he has
he has some learning disabilities and some psychiatric emotional issues that's been documented since elementary. So that definitely plays a part.
And I was just thinking about this too, because I don't know if you know, I've been involved in kind of mental health advocacy for a long time. My brother's actually heading down to a conference down south about it. He does a lot of stuff with autism and mental disabilities in the community. But one thing I'm thinking is as I'm reading this, it's so the judge, does that not factor in at all? The fact that this kid it's he has these emotional issues that he has to deal with. Was that not factored in at all when talking about what kind of judgment should be coming down, or whether or not he should be sitting in a juvenile detention facility for the entire summer?
The judge has him sentenced already. We're asking that she recuses herself. It was obvious. I don't want to go as far as to say she's racist, even though that's what I hollered in the courtroom yesterday, because she was just blatantly keeping this young man locked up. And America should be, the law says innocent until proven guilty. However, you can be housed in a detention center. You could be dressed as a criminal. You can be addressed as a criminal. You could sit there and do this time as a criminal and then be released, and it's oh, sorry. You're guilty until they sort it out. And for 15 years old, that's just horrible, and especially because it's documented that he has psychiatric issues to where he shouldn't. They don't care about the homeless or the mental ill in Kalamazoo. Yeah, and that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I would back that up. Yeah, that's two constituencies, and especially when they overlap.
And you can ride through downtown Kalamazoo. That's where you can get the evidence. There's tons of money in Kalamazoo, and you ride through here, especially if you're not from here, 8 o'clock in the morning, and you will see the homeless and you will see the mentally ill walking around downtown Kalamazoo, where it's supposed to be thriving, and Radisson, and so many sky rises and things like that, and these are the forgot about. And
no, that's right,
I see it all the time. So
and I think I really want to touch on too, as somebody who I have a little bit of experience working with people with violent behaviors and emotional disorders in the school system. But there's certain protocols that you have. There's certain ways that you are supposed to deal with these students, and just from what I read, it's they did not do that at all. And I'm looking at the way this teacher reacted, responding legally.
Especially if she initiated it. Yikes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about kind of two aspects of that. One is just how do you think the teacher should have handled it in the room, and also how much of this do you think is a factor of the fact that Isaiah is a young black man? I have literally seen young white students with problems like Isaiah do exactly what Isaiah did, and any disciplinary measures they did were strictly within the school system. It was not brought to into the court.
Yeah. Okay, I'm glad you asked me that. To answer the first part, I grew up in Gary, Indiana, where corporal punishment was lawful. We received swats, paddles with wood boards, or hit on the hand with yardsticks. This went from kindergarten till you graduate. This was a normal way of life. It took me moving to Kalamazoo to realize, like, wow, that's just totally not right. Now that I know that it's not right, I say to any teacher, you're only there to teach. You're there to guide, mentor. They have parents or a guardian. That should be somebody else's job. If it gets to a point where you have to grab a child, then that should be the guardian or the parent that's grabbing it, and hopefully not out of anger even then. But a teacher should never, in my opinion, should never grab a student, because it can escalate it very, very easily. And you don't know the student's background to know if they're being abused, or if he could be a black belt in karate and taught, just reflexes. So I don't think a teacher should do that. And then going to the second part, it definitely wasn't handled right. From him being a young black male, I definitely believe that it played a part in him already being guilty. When MLive put the article out, the comments on it were just they were horrendous. They just
don't read the comments.
Yeah, it was just to hear the community already sentence a young person that's only 15 years old. This was just like, to be that young and do something to where you could be criminally charged. I believe the community has failed somewhere. That's my honest opinion. Somewhere along the way. And so to just say, well, we don't know what step we missed or what he may have missed, lock him up. That's the wrong answer.
It's interesting you bring that up. I was like, how much of that do you think is just kind of like this empathy gap? Because again, like, I think there'd be like two different ways that I think a lot of these very same people would be viewing this. If it was just like a white student with emotional disturbance versus Isaiah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me say this real fast. I have 3 felonies. I moved up here from Gary, Indiana when I was 17 years old, and it was culture shock. Gary is predominantly black. Kalamazoo is more of a mixed culture. We were at Maple Hill Mall. I was accused of stealing. I did not steal, and so I demanded an apology. This got the police called. By the time the police were called, I was charged with assault and battery, though I didn't touch anyone. So when he grabbed me, I yanked away from him. Instincts.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This got me charged with resisting and obstructing an officer, and me and my first cousin were whooped. And at 17 years old, I was charged with my first felony and subsequently went to jail for the next 7 to 8 years once I was in the system. I was only 17 years old and was like manhandled by grown adults. And this is to me, it's a very similar situation because you have an adult versus a child. And I grew up without a father. Nobody asked me anything about the cultural shock of where I was feeling. I didn't talk to a counselor, a psychiatrist, a therapist before being sentenced to find out where my mind was at. Did I just yank away? Do I have a problem with authority? There was nothing in place. And Isaiah was, and the sad part about this is the school system, and it was handled pretty much the same exact way. He was sentenced, he was manhandled by an adult, and the sad part is we have a prosecutor that, Jeff Gettings, so far he's not being transparent enough to say where he stands on this. They're looking at bonding this over and charging him as an adult, and he could face like 10 years.
I saw that.
That is ridiculous. 15 years old, that shouldn't even come up in the same conversation. That is literally giving up on the youth and just discarding them, period.
Man, so thinking about this situation, so we've got this possibility of this teenage kid maybe doing like 10 years in prison for this. You know, do you see this a lot in the Kalamazoo area in the school system? I mean, I know like this is a situation that you and a few of our other colleagues have picked up on, but kind of like, I know that you do a lot of work around sea change and the school to prison pipeline, but a situation like Isaiah's, like how unique is it really in like the school system, talking like Norrick, Central, and the middle schools around here too?
It's unfortunately not unique at all. They have warehouses that they call alternative schools, where they will send the schools for nonviolent actions. You can get too many referrals for laughing too many times in class and be put in a school called the OUT, which is the Alternative Learning Program. And when I went into that school, it looks like a juvenile home. The kids in there, they're medicated. Some are on tether, some are on probation. They have monitors that ride the bus with them like prison guards. And let's be clear, when we talk about school to prison pipeline, this is real. They really take third grade test scores and start filtering them through. And to get anything built in America where it's capitalist and it's all about money, you want to get with your investors, you want prime location, and you want to know that you can fill these beds. In order to know that they can fill these beds, they literally prey on the ones that get the referrals. They prey on the poverty-stricken. It's not really a color thing, but the people of color do get it faster and sometimes the worst, but it's a money thing. So you can be poor and white, you going to jail in America. And if you're young, America locks up more juveniles than anybody in this entire nation, like period.
We lock them up more at people in general than anywhere else in the world by a long shot.
Exactly.
Land of the free, right?
We only make up 5% of the nation's population, but make up an alarming 11, like over.
I think it's 25% of the world's prison population.
Yeah.
So like a couple of things that kind of like really hit home for me. Like you mentioned this is a failure in the community. Like I see if you look at it most directly, it seems like it's mostly the teacher and the judge that have really put this kid in this kind of position. But like there really is this doesn't happen without a lot of people just being complicit in a system that's allowed something like this to happen.
Right.
Now, what are the names of the teacher and this judge against, in case people want to start putting the pressure on? You're pulling that up? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, by all means. So something else I want to bring up, the thought of sending kids to some sort of prison alt school for laughing too much is also absurd to me, because if I don't know if how many listeners went to suburbanite public school, but kids are laughing. They're doing that a lot. They're getting in trouble. They pull stuff.
Adolescents.
They're dumb kids, just like everyone else.
It's interesting too that you bring up it is heavily a class thing too, because any of my listeners out there, and I know a lot of people come from the rural diaspora that we got here in Kalamazoo area. You've probably you might have grown up in those predominantly white schools, but I think it's also an observable phenomenon. You look at the rich kids, the kids of the rich parents, they do not see the same kind of consequences that the working class of the poor kids do.
Something else that kind of hits home to me is coincidentally enough, my baby brother also happens to be named Micah. And, I use the term baby loosely. He's the youngest of us, and he's about 9 or 10 years old right now. And the thought of someone like him ending up in this position is kind of unthinkable to me. And it really illustrates just the way that the school to prison pipeline works and targets how intentionally it targets poor people and people of color, that this hasn't really the thought of a teacher assaulting him and then him getting in trouble for it is just out of the question for someone in my family's position. But I guess if you want to put it into perspective, just maybe next time you see this happening to some kid in your community, think about maybe them having the name of one of your younger sibs. What if this happened to them? This is that could be a step to closing the empathy gap, I'll say.
Oh yeah, and so something that really strikes home for me too is I grew up in the Edison neighborhood, and particularly like with my brother, he did a lot of pretty out there behaviors that if we didn't have like the understanding community and neighbors that we did, could have gotten him into a lot of trouble with his teachers or the police. And there were a lot of times I had to worry about him like getting in trouble with law enforcement. And to see Isaiah get targeted like that, it kind of hits home for me like that too. But yeah, I want to toss it back over to you too, and just kind of follow up with maybe Nora's question. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about like people listening, what maybe they can do, take action about this.
Okay, well, I want to say the judge's name is Julie Phillips.
Julie Phillips.
Yeah, and she is something else. One of the things that we can do is definitely August 10th is the next court date, and we ask for participatory defense, which is people packing the courtrooms, showing the support. A lot of times these convictions happen in empty courtrooms, so when the system can see a lot of times the support, even though this time it almost just backfired because it scared them, seeing a lot of people of color come through the doors, so they had the police presence and the whispers and the looking around. It was ridiculous, but we will be going back and we will be deeper next time. So
August 10th, by the way, I looked ahead, it is a Friday. So, and it is like, plenty of times ahead. I know a lot of us work on those days, but like that's enough time to request it off.
Yeah.
Give yourself a nice weekend after the court day. Yeah. We'll pack this room and we'll hopefully be celebrating afterwards. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know y'all been working pretty closely with the family too. Have they been making any asks from the community about like what they would like people to be doing as far as like, should people be like hitting up, prosecutor Getting, or even like lending them either like emotional or some sort of support directly to the family?
Yeah, shouts out to Ernest Gathering and his fiance Iris. Those are the parents of Isaiah, and basically what he has asked for the community and for Kalamazoo is just stand together as a community. He doesn't want this to happen to any other children. So that's what he asks. And as far as what you said, shouts out to Shannon Sykes, who's one of our city commissioners. She has an ask that we hit up Jeff Gettings, and I would like to leave his phone number.
All right, go ahead.
So we can give him a call and see what's going on. What are you planning to do with this 15-year-old? And I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it now. Y'all can say something while I'm looking for this number.
Yeah.
Or ask me something.
And let you know, like, Kalamazoo's a pretty small town. Making phone calls like these, writing these letters, it does mean a lot. We've used community solidarity on a lot of issues around here to really get pull them into the right direction. I think like the biggest example of that would probably be County ID. That took months and months of public pressure. The County Commission was kind of waffling on doing that Line 5 resolution, but it was unprecedented pressure from the community. And one of the things I want to add to that, kind of like a cultural level, it's like we got to make sure like we got to be coming out for our people in the community. Yeah. A lot of times, drawing people in to these causes, it's a little bit more abstract. Like, oh, we're trying to get this piece of legislation through, or we're trying to get some kind of resolution passed. But this is somebody who lives here in our community, and that it has a real direct effect. It's like this young man could be doing jail time if he doesn't get the kind of community support that we really need to be coming out and giving him.
I like that you said that, and I like to really break down words. Because a lot of times you can just look at them like the word responsibility is the ability to respond. When I look at community, it's like come and be. Unity is in there, and the first word, you're either looking at breaking down communication and unity, or you're breaking down come and be unified. You see what I'm saying? So when I look at the word unity being in community, it takes us all. It takes us all. I just talked with a young lady earlier, and she was like, well, we can't invite the police in. I said, unfortunately, we have to. We need everyone to play a part, and we can't leave them out because a lot of times they don't get the training that they need to get to deal with real community. To say, well, Isaiah's a real person. He has real issues. Some may be trauma. Jail is not the answer. And if we start being more community, I believe we can get rid of detention centers and jails. And mind you, I want to add this. Kalamazoo Juvenile Home has the best basketball court for teenagers in the city. There's not a high school or community center that rivals this gym. So the money, the investment, they put it where they want the kids to end up going, and that's real.
Wow.
Yeah. And the kids, I learned that from the teenagers. That was not my opinion on what was the best gym. This was literally, it started with young teenagers at Lakeside Detention Center telling me. Wow. And once I started asking, I really started just finding out, and once I looked at it, it was like, whoa. Yeah. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. So were you able to find that number for Jeff Gettings?
Yes, I was. So to hit up your prosecutor in Kalamazoo, who is Jeff Gettings, his office, area code 269-383-8974.
And I'll say that would probably be the best person to hit up about this in Kalamazoo, because he is most directly responsible for the prosecutions in this area, including Isaiah's, and he also is in an electable seat. So, he's responsive to public pressure, Is he gonna get reelected in the next one?
I would want to reiterate that, a lot of people really have tried calling their representatives before, but this is typically in a context of statewide or national issues where those so-called representatives are so regularly ready to just ignore us, like Fred Upton, like Debbie Stabenow, like our governor. But on a local level, it's a lot easier to get the kind of pressure in a way that it gets them shaking. It's something that's a bit related, but something else really disappointing about the results in California. The district attorney that was complicit in the murder of Stephen Clark won a re-election. To be fair, it was pretty close to when the primary day happened, and money and name recognition goes a long way. But we got to make sure that the people who are complicit with these systems pay a political price for it. We can't just let them continue to have their shiny government jobs.
Yeah, because see, I'm glad you said that, Nora, because just like Jeff Gettings, Kalamazoo prides itself in being progressive, and we get it, we're liberal. So Jeff Gettings represents the Democratic Party not being in office in over 150 years or something like that. And so he's fair. He sits on the board of KPEP. KPEP has this exploitive coffee shop where they pawn it off to people as, oh, we're doing a great job, when it's really legal slavery. These are the things that unless we set it on the table and people get a chance to see from the lens of the real community, not the shiny government officials and the people that just love the job and can care less about the people that they're destroying and the families that they're hurting.
If you don't mind, can you tell me a bit more about this coffee shop stuff? Because this place is
coffee, and it's right down the street from Fletcher Collective, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that's why I'd like to Ed, if you would.
Okay, well, KPEP, they've been doing it for years. They have a lawn service, a catering service, and they are the pimps of Kalamazoo when it comes to getting free labor and money for it. So they built this nice coffee shop. where it's ran by the inmates and who doesn't get paid. And mind you, there's so many other coffee shops in Kalamazoo that once they get this so-called training at this coffee shop will not hire them once they're out of there. But yeah, KPEP invested into this coffee shop where they make money hand over fist as usual, and the inmates do it for so-called job training or community service.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like I've been tuned into like what's going with the whole K-PEP thing, and it's like, the main thing I take away from that is like I wasn't sure whether to really like it or not, and I didn't realize they don't pay them. That is probably the big thing. Is like because I guess okay, I'm hearing this thing about they're getting job training or whatever, is okay, but yeah, not to mention. The prices they charge down in that place, they can afford to be paying them, that's for sure.
Yeah. But see, this is standard practice. A lot of prisons go in and get prison labor for cheap, and then when the prisoners get released, they can't get jobs because these places don't hire felons.
We don't hire people with records.
Yeah, so this is like standard practice. Like the 13th Amendment does allow for slavery to exist. That is the loophole. So as long as you can run a detention center, we can start a detention center tomorrow and literally go get volunteers, and the state calls it community service, and we could literally get a real service from them. I was in KPEP and did tons of community service, including on the catering. And when I was in, they actually started a restaurant, which was Glorious Pies. And this was all free labor, but 100% profit for them. 100% profit.
And that ties back when we were talking about too, because this is basically what they're talking about. What this judge is talking about with Isaiah's future. Is Isaiah going to get the help they need? Are they going to be able to go back into the school system and get the education that they deserve? Or are they going to be making pies or coffee for the next 10 years or license plates?
Right.
Yeah.
So it looks like I hate to cut us off, but it looks like we're almost out of time.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier to a lot of people that might be listening, I got an interview with Between the Lines, which is Michigan's leading LGBT magazine, and I have the audio for it. Looks like we're going to have to play that next week. But thanks so much to Ed for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I want to say, Ed, was there anything else that we didn't get a chance to talk about that maybe you want to tell the folks at home?
I just want to say, just love one another, support one another. It takes us all. Shouts out to the Gathering family. Let's be there for August 10th. Shouts out to Sea Change, Michigan United, Northside, We Active, Shannon Sykes, the rest of the city commissioners that's really pulling their weight and representing. And let's just all be a real city and a real community.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. And yeah, again, that's August 10th. And I know Ed Genesis, Shannon Sykes, and Alicia Johnson. They are all very much on top of this issue. Would it be okay to say if people want to get more involved, can they get a hold of y'all?
Yes. Either contact me, you can reach me, Facebook. You can reach all three of us, Shannon Sykes, Alicia, Ed Genesis. Hit us up. I prefer Facebook because we want to make this social, viral, and we want to keep it in people's faces as much as we can.
All right, hear that. Okay, once again, thank you, Ed, for coming on the show. I think that does just about wrap us up. So want to thank y'all for tuning in. Y'all have been listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. You can catch our full episodes on YouTube over at our YouTube channel. We also have a Facebook page. And please spread it around. Not just so you can, hear me and Nora and Lawrence and all of us pontificate on today's issues, but we always try to, let you know what's going on in the community, and the more people that know about this stuff, the better. So keep your dial locked. We've got more Wider on the way, and keep on fighting for that revolution solution.